Good morning, everyone. We are now here in our meeting. The church is the one reporting. Please allow me to share my screen. Okay. Okay. So here's my report. Wait. Okay. So my report this morning is all about the the golden age of Christianity. So here, as you can see here, the Christianity has a uh, isang pinagdugod ko. The golden age of medieval Christianity, spanning from the 11th to 13th centuries, was a period of remarkable cultural and spiritual flourishing that profoundly shaped the course of Western civilization. During this era, the church emerged as a unifying force, providing both spiritual guidance and temporal leadership across Europe. The Golden Age witnessed advancement in theology, philosophy, art, and architecture, leaving an enduring legacy that continues to inspire and fascinate. So the mendicant orders. Mendicant orders are primarily certain Roman Catholic religious orders that have adopted their male members a lifestyle of poverty, traveling and living in urban areas of purposes of preaching, evangelization, and ministry, especially to the poor. So we can see here the mendicant orders. So these are primarily these are a certain Roman Catholic religious orders, no, so that they adapt their male members a lifestyle of poverty, so they have a unique practices. So Peter Waldo is a precursor of the mendicant orders. uh, uh, a 12th century merchant from Lyons who heard the story of a monk who practiced extreme poverty and was moved by it to devote himself to a life of poverty and preaching. So, one flock under one shepherd. The Golden Age was marked by the consolidation of papal authority with the Pope, the Bishop of Rome, established himself as the supreme leader of the church. This process, gradual but decisive, culminated in the 11th century with the rise of powerful popes like Gregory VII, who asserted the church independence from secular rulers. So the Concordant of Worms, which granted the emperor the power to invest bishops with secular authority but not with sacred authority, did not end the difficulties of the papacy. So Pope Innocent is one of the shape the history of the golden age of medieval Christianity. So as well as the Frederick Barbarossa. So the theological activity. So they have their theological activity, and that is what we call scholasticism. So the 13th century, which marked the apex of papal power and birth of the mendicant orders, was also the high point of medieval scholasticism. So this theology, which developed in the schools, had its own characteristic mythology. So it took first in monasteries. So, but in the 12th century, cathedral schools became the center of theological activity, only to be supplanted early in the 13th century by universities. So in a way, this is another consequence of the growth of the cities. From monasteries, which usually existed apart from centers of population, theology moved to cathedral schools, that is, to schools connected with churches that had bishops and therefore were usually in the cities. Then it centered in universities, which were vast associations of scholars gathered in principal cities. So Anselm is one of the most forerunner of scholasticism. So a native of Italy, he had joined the monastery of Bec in Normandy in 1060 or 1060 AD. So he was attracted excuse me, he was attracted to that particular monastery by the fame of its abbot Lanfranc. So Lanfranc was abbot of Anselm, so who left in 1078 to become Archbishop of Canterbury. In 1066, William of Normandy had conquered England and was now drawing on Normandy for leaders. both in ecclesiastical and civil matters. In 1093, Anselm himself was called to England to succeed Lanfranc as Archbishop of Canterbury. He went reluctantly, for he knew that he would soon clash with the king over the question of the relative authority of church and state. So, indeed, under William and then under his son Henry, Anselm spent most of his career exiled from Canterbury. He made use of those periods of exile as he had done with his years as Beck by meditating and writing on theological issues. So the developments were significant for the early history of scholasticism. The growth of universities and the introduction of the teachings of Aristotle into Western Europe. So the universities were in part the result of the growth of cities. Students congregated in urban centers, first at the cathedral schools and then at others, and all of these were eventually united in what came to be known as general studies. So this time they are this is the starting point when the general studies had known. So out of this evolved the main universities of Europe. But these were not so much institutions like our modern universities as they were guilds of scholars, both teachers and students, organized in order to defend the rights of their members and to certify the level of proficiency achieved by each. So this medieval classroom at the University of Salamanca shows that benches and tables on which students sat and worked, as well as the pulpit from which the professor spoke. When the professor was commenting on the text, this text was presented by a reader seated in the special section just below the professor. So there is what we call arrangement of their class, no? So when the commentator of the text wanted to comment the text, he was he's uh, seated. He will be seated in a special section just below the professor. So Franciscan missionaries. So this in this picture we can see here the missionaries. So there is what we call the Franciscan missionaries. So Francis had been passionately interested in conversion of Muslims, and in 1219 traveled to the Mieta in Egypt, where he had interviewed with Al-Kamil, an Ayyubid sultan, and was apparently treated with respect. Perhaps out of that experience, the last section of his rule takes for granted that some of his followers will be missionaries and commands that those who under divine inspiration seek to go among Saracens and other infidels must seek approval from their superiors in the order. So here, the stones that bear witness the architecture. This is the architecture of the church. No, so medieval churches had two purposes: one didactic and one cultic. So this is the purposes of the medieval church. No, let us remember that the one is didactic and one is the cultic. So their didactic purpose responded to the needs of an age when books were scarce and there were not many who could read them. Church buildings thus became the books of the illiterate, and an attempt was made to set forth in them the whole of biblical history, the lives of great saints and martyrs, the virtues and vices, the promise of heaven and the punishment of hell. Today it is difficult for us to read these architectural books, but those who worship in them knew their most minute details. In them, their parents and grandparents had read stories and teachings that they in turn had learned from earlier generations. The Gothic cathedrals that still dominate the skyline of many cities are legacy of the Middle Ages to future generations. There were cases such as that of the Cathedral of uh, Beauvais, where the vault collapsed because the architects sought to impose on stone an ideal vertically of which it was not capable. Perhaps this too was a symbol of an age when the lofty ideals of Hildebrand, Francis, and others sought to overcome the resistance of human nature and often failed. So, as you can see in the report, there are different activity, there are different happenings and events that happen in the golden age of the church. So you can see that there are people who are forerunners of this event, and there are also the missionaries, as what we have learned a while ago. So this is my report. Good morning.